You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, this is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. It's in acapella today, or whatever the hell they call it. So welcome to the show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. Turns out me and her just do not get along as a voice, so I need to have her do her own thing because I just don't have that operatic voice. I'm sorry, folks. There's a lot of things we do on the show. We have so many brilliant minds and authors on the show. Maybe I need to invite some ballet artists on the show. Opera. It's one of those days. Opera artists on the show, so they can teach us to sing opera. If you want that, send the message to me. Author on the show, and we're excited to have him. He's got his latest book out May 2nd, 2023. Why You Feel the Way You Do. Understand and Heal the Source of Stressful Emotions. Reneau Peurifoy is on the show with us today, and we're going to be talking to him about his amazing work. He is an internationally known author, therapist, and teacher. Over his 4-decade career, he's written books that have been translated into multiple languages. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, as well as many podcasts. The Anxiety Disorders Association of America, the nation's primary organization for anxiety-related problems, has invited him to speak at 11 of their national conferences. And actually, the ADAA, the Anxiety Disorders Association, as a puppet to go, look what's wrong with this guy. No, I'm just kidding. They don't do that. Welcome to the show, Reneau. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for coming. It's wonderful to have you as well. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Easiest place is whyemotions.com. So whyemotion.com.
Why emotions?
No, it's singular.
Oh, singular. Whyemotion.com.
Yep.
That's what I always say every time I'm freaking out about just about anything. Why all this darned emotion? So I think you've written several books on anxiety and anger and emotion. Haven't you?
Oh, yeah. I like I say, anxiety and anger has been good for me. So
I'm sorry, I gotta laugh at that. You know, when I was a young person, I was suffering from severe ADHD.
yeah.
And I remember I went into the ER one time and I said, I think I have brain cancer. I think something's going on or something. And they go, no, you have anxiety. And I'm like, yeah, I have fear, happiness, sadness, and everything else. Like, what's your point? And they're like, no, anxiety is like a thing. So there you go. So give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside, why you feel the way you do.
Well, I take people on a journey. I start off with basically talking about the 7 basic emotions that we share with our pets and any other furry little critter out there, and then talk about how they develop into triggers, and then some of the negative and positive core response patterns that we have, and then I wrap up with the 3 things that positive psychology talks about that make people happy in life. And so it's kind of an interesting journey as we go through all those different things. And each chapter ends with a set of recommended activities that people can do if they want to actually apply some of the ideas in a practical way into their life. That's part of my teaching background.
I love it.
Yeah.
So you've written several books on this. What made you want to write this one specifically?
Well, actually, I had a publisher come to me and asked me to do a book, and so I was thinking about one of the things I've always been fascinated with is just emotions and behavior and all of that all my life. So I figured, let me take the opportunity to go and see what the current research has been doing and do a book on emotions. I mean, had chickens and rabbits and dogs, cats, parrot, all kinds of animals when I was little. Both my parents came from farming backgrounds, so
Mm-hmm.
had the only trained chickens on the block. So that was kind of cool.
So there you go.
So I've always been interested in animal behavior and studied in biology. That was my major, was animal behavior, and then I switched over to human behavior. And I often say it's kind of a step down, but
Mm-hmm.
animals are so easy to understand. Humans, we do some crazy stuff sometimes, even though basically once you understand how we're wired, it's not that mysterious.
I have two huskies and I've had four now,
Yeah.
and they have really helped me with my anxiety, with my emotional issues and stress things over the years. It's always funny how they know when you feel stressed or when you're
Oh
worried
yeah.
about something, or even if I don't feel well, like I don't know, I've it's a Taco Bell night, and the next morning I'm in the fetal position. They'll come up in the bed and be like, "Hey, it's okay." And they'll snuggle with me and be cute, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I usually there's one on one side, one on the other, laying beside me, and it's kind of funny. And then the rest of the time when I'm feeling fine, they're just like, yeah, whatever you know, what about you?
Well, they read you just like little kids read their parents.
Ah,
We have that ability to read people. It's just we become so dependent upon language, we tend to start dependent upon that. But we still get vibes off of people, all that nonverbal stuff that goes on. And animals that's their primary language is reading you and working through their emotions. So
isn't it so funny? And they kind of know, like they come up, and I wonder if they pick up stuff off my breath, because they always come up and they'll smell my breath. Is that one of the ways they tell, maybe by your breathing, or
well,
I don't know?
and body odor, it's like cancer patients and stuff. Animals, there's some animals can pick that up, from just stuff that we don't know exactly what they're picking up, but they're picking something up off the odor or something. And
Uh-huh.
plus, they read your body language. It's interesting. If you think about it, uh, all mammals, like when they're angry, they kind of grit their teeth, and then when they're frightened, they have a lot of similar stuff in terms of expressions, which is why you can tell when your dogs are, frightened or they're happy or they're angry at something. There's a universal nonverbal communication that goes on there.
So basically, what you're saying is my dogs are coming up to me going, "You need to shower, dude. I
Well,
mean, we're
sometimes,
dogs and you stink."
sometimes,
Basically, what it is. So
of
there
course,
you go.
of course, they may like the gross stuff.
I don't know. They're probably like, "Hey, you smell pretty good, man. You're just like one of us. You're just smelly old nasty dog."
Yeah, well,
Um,
what's with all this perfume stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, why'd you shower? You had such a good funk going on there. So there you go. So let's get into the book. How do we learn about the emotional circuits that we share with our pets? How do we get familiar with them and maybe understand them better? Because I think sometimes when people aren't feeling well, they'll tend to maybe shun their pets and be like, "Hey, leave me alone. I'm trying to work through my issues," and then maybe that hurts the dog's feelings or something. I don't know.
Well, it probably does, and the dog probably wants to come up and
Yeah,
cuddle and give you a little bit of little comfort there. Yeah,
yeah,
they do that.
yeah.
The two ones that get talked a lot about are, of course, anger and fear, and those
Hmm.
have to do with threat. If a threat is manageable, then you'll tend to get angry, and I use that in a broad sense because anger can range from just irritation, you're stepping on my toes, to rage, but it's just basically threat, and I want to take the threat out. Fear, the threat seems unmanageable, so I want to get away from it. Grizzly bear coming at me, I want to go the
Hmm.
other way. And of course, fear can range from just apprehension to panic, and those are the two that we know the most of. Two that are kind of interesting. There's one called seeking, and that's if you look at any baby, they want to explore the environment. They're licking, they're chewing, they're feeling their way around the environment. And we have this desire to kind of want to know what's out there, which is why if you're sitting in a room and somebody walks in, the first thing everybody does is they glance over there. And it's almost an unconscious kind of an urge to want to do that. In fact, let me back up and just talk about what emotions are. Neuroscientists refer to them as affects.
Hmm.
So an affect pushes you to want to do something. So the most basic ones are your sensory affects like heat, cold, pressure. You've been sitting too long. I want to move around. If I get cold, I want to get hot. Then you have the homeostatic, the ones that have to do with balancing your body, like hunger and thirst. The
Ah,
thirstier you are, all of the philosophical stuff leaves your mind. I just want to find something, to quench
yeah.
my thirst.
You're just
Same
like,
thing with hunger.
I need to eat or someone will die.
And so emotions are kind of like the next level up, and they push you to take care of some kind of a need. So again, anger, fear, threat, uh, this need to want to know what's out there, again, the basis of our curiosity.
Mhm.
And then there's one called play, and it's interesting. The guy that did a lot of the early research in the modern era, Panksepp, he was called the rat ticklers because he would tickle rats and stuff. But he found that he could turn off the upper part of their brain, and they still wanted to play. So it's a very deep seated kind of a need to want to interact with people.
Huh.
And I know, like my great granddaughter, her favorite thing is tickle me. Uh, and we still want to interact and play, and it's part of how social animals learn limits. You
So
know
you can be brainless and still wanna play, basically,
exactly.
according to the mouse experiment.
If you're a mouse, yes.
That explains the people I know.
Well,
Wonder yeah.
that's true. And again, it's you learn how to do too much by doing too much, right? And
Yeah,
that's
well,
when
that's true.
and then we interact that way. So again, it's part of our social stuff. It turns out there's a second fear circuit, and in babies we call it separation anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
and it's why we miss people when they're gone, especially once we bonded with them. And
Mhm.
there's a complementary caring circuit that also later on develops in what they call the secondary emotions, like love, pride, those types of things.
Mm.
So those are the 7 ones. Oh, I forgot the one that comes up in during adolescence, which is lust, right?
Yeah.
And
So it sounds like these are paired with the 7 deadly sins or something here.
well, yeah, they're kind of underneath there somewhere.
There you go. Yeah, I know that lust part. I've been having that since I was a teenager, I think.
Yeah,
You get
that's when
that
that one kicks up with those the hormones kind of activated.
they do. What's that about? So let me ask you this. I saw this really cool experiment where and I think it's a famous experiment you may have heard of, but they did a thing where they took babies and mothers, and they held babies up in front of their mothers like a couple feet away,
Uh-huh.
and the mothers would play with them. Hey, you go, I do the same thing with my dogs. "You good dog." But they did a thing where the mothers just went still face and didn't
Right,
show any expression, didn't say
right.
anything, and just were still faced. And they showed how just upset the kids got and
Yeah,
freaked out,
yeah.
and how much we need that neurological
Yep,
exchange that
yep,
probably
yep,
plays into our emotions and security and everything else. And I mean, the kids would be looking around and freaking out and started screaming and
yeah.
writhing, and it was interesting to see the body language go between those 2.
Well, and again, it has to do with that nonverbal communication. That's an
Mhm.
infant's primary language. They haven't
Yeah.
learned language yet, and so they're basically just like your dogs. They're just picking up from all that nonverbal stuff that's going
Mhm.
on, and
Mhm.
and they want that connection. There is that desire, that caring circuit, and then so the panic
Mm.
circuit kicks in.
Mhm. So how do I when those babies do that with me, and I'm doing the nonverbal communication, how do I communicate change your own diaper?
Well,
Stop going poop on the floor.
that's when you hand it to the mother
Oh, there okay, that's all right. All
or,
right.
or the dad.
Note to self, hand off baby to someone else or yeah, stop putting the hose on them. Child services says you can't do that anymore. I'm
Uh,
just kidding. Don't do that, people. That's a joke. We do jokes on the show. It's a comedy bit. So there you go. So this is interesting.
mm,
It took me a long time to kind of realize there was that emotional link and emotional sort of connection between my dogs and stuff. I think a lot of people maybe struggle with that. Maybe they don't really understand the dog's role or pet's role in that.
well, they become a substitute for a person in terms of affections. That's why
Yeah,
people love their pets so much. They give you unconditional love, especially a
unconditional
dog.
love, as opposed to everyone else in my life who is
Yeah,
like, if you
yeah,
have money, we give you love.
yeah, yeah.
It's very
And
conditional. It's
and
very
we,
transactional, actually.
in fact, it's interesting because out of those 3 things that make people happy, number
Hmm.
one by far is relationship.
Hmm.
Having a deep connection with somebody else. When you think about it, that's one of the things that people are often missing nowadays. I got 500 Facebook friends, but I don't have anybody I can really be real with.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
there's nobody showing up to my funeral from any of that group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My favorite Jewish proverb is I want 7 people or 6 people that aren't looking at their watches carrying my casket. Right?
That's true. They're just my pets will probably be the ones carrying my casket. They'll just
Yeah,
hook him to a sleigh, and the huskies will pull him down to the cemetery or something. Although I think I'm set to be cremated because I'm not leaving enough money behind for my inheritance people to get anything. So they're just gonna have a bonfire out back, really,
yeah,
and just kind of leave it at that. And it's going to be more like a funeral pyre because they're just going to be like, screw that guy. But hopefully they bring marshmallows. I don't know. That's kind of weird. So discover ways to quiet destructive emotional triggers is another thing you talk about in the book.
right.
Help people with that because I mean there's a lot of people getting triggered now on social media.
Well, and I'll give some simple examples, but first let me say with people, the answer I used to tell my clients the answer is always E. And in multiple choice questions, that's the all of the above, right?
Oh,
And everybody's always looking for, tell me the one thing I can do so everything's going to be wonderful. And oftentimes you got to do multiple things to get
uh,
wonderful, right? But with simple triggers, like one of the examples I give in the book is a couple of people that are on a plane that's get hit by lightning.
mm-hmm.
And it's a very scary event. So the next time you get ready to get on a plane, there's some anxiety there. It's
Yeah.
kind of a form of PTSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one person gets to where they can fly, the other person can't.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who can fly does what I call what's happening, what's real, and then you distract yourself. So what's happening is I've got some anxiety because that last flight,
Okay.
nothing really actually happened to me. Again, what's real is I was safe. We landed, and I'll probably never experience this again. Okay, now let me distract myself with what I need to do. So it's kind of a thing that you can use for a lot of simple triggers. I had one gal who had a employer who resembled her abusive parent,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was getting all triggered by him when she'd go to office. And so we use that same idea. What's happening is, he looks like my parent, sounds like my parent. What's real is he's not. He's just my boss. We're just going to talk about, the weekly schedule. And over time, she was able to desensitize and actually become friends with him.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and that's the thing with negative triggers is you can desensitize to them. And
Mm-hmm.
desensitization just simply means getting used to something. The first job you had, you were nervous, you weren't sure about stuff, but after a while, it's just a job, right?
Yeah. It's
You
just
go to your next job, there's a lot of anxiety, you're not sure, but after a while, you desensitize to it, and it's just the next job, right?
mm-hmm.
Same thing with marriage and all kinds of other stuff, right? You desensitize and you get used to things.
Yeah.
You look at things that go like on in an operating room or something, things that people get desensitized to, medical personnel,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just something they're dealing with every day. So you can learn to do that. And the person who did not desensitize, the big key is the self-talk. I mean, their thoughts were things like, "Oh my gosh, what if that happens again? What if a plane crashes? What if, what if it's the end of my life? Oh, this is terrible. I can't stand it." And, that type of self-talk, of course, reinforces the trigger.
Mm.
And eventually that
And probably
person,
the emotional
well, yeah,
aspect of that,
well,
right?
yeah.
They start cycling the
Well,
emotions.
exactly. The negative self-talk gets all those emotions going, and it reinforces that association in the brain, of danger with planes. And so
Mhm.
the trigger gets stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about emotions is they're the way that your brain indexes information.
Mm.
So the brain is always making associations from the time you're born,
Mhm.
and things that are positive get kind of a positive emotional tag to it, and things that are negative get a negative tag, which is why experiential learning is more valuable than just simple book learning. I
Mm.
can read everything there is to know about driving a car, and I can be an expert on driving a car, but until I get behind the wheel, oh my gosh, that didn't work. Oh, this feels good. Now the brain can start associating that information with with the emotional triggers or emotional tags, and eventually take it on as an automatic response pattern.
So let me ask you this about what you referenced earlier, where people, start operating in the now and the present. It
Right.
sounds like that's a very logical approach, where you're logically telling yourself, "Hey, calm down with your emotions. Here's our present. Here's what's really happening." Do you find that both women, I mean, men, we can deal with logic and reason pretty well, especially if we're based in our masculine. Do you find that women have a harder trouble because women are usually based and filter everything through their emotion? Do you find that they have a harder time making that logical recognition, or is it a logical sort of?
It's pretty similar across board. Whenever you have strong emotion going on, the logical part of your brain shuts down,
Okay.
which is why military, medical personnel, they train so that they don't have to think about it. They can just
Hmm.
act because in that moment when there's all that adrenaline pumping and your emotions are up, those frontal lobes aren't working really well. And so you have to have things memorized to do. Uh, and so like if you have a phobia, like a gal who has a water phobia, right?
Hmm.
That I was working with. As soon as she saw water, the thoughts just start racing. Oh my gosh, water! I got to get away. The emotions kick up, and so you have to slow that down and reconnect or reactivate that thinking, that rational part of the brain, so that you can go through that desensitization process.
Hmm.
So in her case, her brothers used to tell her that there are piranhas in the water; they're going to eat her toes, and so you know siblings provide therapists with a lot of work. So
Oh, is that what the cause of it is?
a lot of times. Uh, anyway, so we started out with gave her some relaxation techniques, gave her some coping self statements, and basically the what's happening, what's real. Okay, what's happening is this is a conditioned response pattern from when my brothers told me those stupid things. They were never piranhas. I was always safe. I'm safe now, and just start sitting next to the pool, right?
Hmm.
And eventually get where she's got sitting for some time with her feet in the pool, and then eventually getting into the pool, all the time managing the anxiety, in a gradual way. And you can actually desensitize to anything through that process. I've taken so many people through different types of fears and phobias just through that process of gradual desensitization, managing the anxiety so
Hmm.
that they eventually get comfortable in that situation. But at
So
some point in time, you gotta actually face it.
so you might as well just face it. It's is it you fall off a horse, you get back on sort of concept.
Well, the idea is the only way you can do something is by doing it.
Mhm.
So,
So
like,
maybe if you're afraid of snakes, you just need to go play with some. I mean, play with some.
well,
Snake
and
transmitters,
again,
right?
you do it in a gradual way. You might
Yeah,
start
right.
across the room with a
Okay.
snake in a container and eventually get closer to it and
Uh-huh.
touch, that type of stuff. And
So,
probably don't use a rattlesnake, right? So,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Note to self: stop using the rattlesnakes to reprogram the employees. There's been some complaints
yeah.
and some charges. But you mentioned something that was really interesting to me that made me change a paradigm in my head. You said that the way we use emotions and maybe emotional. I don't have it exactly.
The
Um,
emotional tags on your memories. It's the way your
yeah,
memory
it's where
indexes information.
index. There you go. We
Yeah,
create a library of indexes,
yeah.
and I love that. I never thought of that way. Boy, I've got a hell of a library going on there.
Well, you see it when you use modalities like eye movement desensitization, where you're dealing with a particular traumatic thing, and then the
Mhm,
person will have a cascade of memories, which logically are very unconnected, but on an emotional
mhm.
level, they're connected.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that works up.
Now, this probably plays into what one of our guests or one of our listeners, G1 Red Crypto, thanks for the comment. You don't really remember things that don't have an emotional charge associated. So I think what he's implying is sometimes we may not remember those emotional things. Maybe we have a trauma that we've kind of buried in our subconscious because it's too much to deal with or something. Is that
Well,
possible?
oh yeah, I mean, people do that all the time, and
Hmm.
you see that most often, like with childhood stuff, especially uh, a child is not able to process the emotion like an adult, and so a lot of times they'll just stick it over there and get on with life, and
Yeah.
which is why a lot of times that stuff comes up when you get older, because now the brain is ready to start processing some of that stuff and dealing with it.
Is that why?
Mhm.
And so that's why it starts to come back to you after you've
It may,
buried it away.
it doesn't have to, but a lot of times, I mean, sometimes you don't necessarily have to process everything. So,
Huh. That really explains a lot of things. People, they seem to forget about their trauma,
mhm,
and then it comes back to them in later life, and they're like, "Why is this coming up now?" And they're questioning their sanity, and maybe you're questioning their sanity, going,
yeah.
"How come this is suddenly appearing now?" But that would explain it, that maybe you finally reached a point where your mind thinks, okay, they could maybe deal with this.
Yeah, 20s is a very common time because,
Hmm.
when you're in grade school, like I said, your brain's just not able
Wow.
to deal with it. Adolescence, you got all that adolescence BS stuff you're dealing with, right? So,
Yeah.
and so 20s things are starting to settle down. So a lot of times that's when a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff will come
And
back.
when you're a child, I mean, you'd have no way of processing half the stuff
No,
that comes at you,
no.
and if your parents are, there's issues in your parents' relationship, or there's, high toxic environments that, you're not feeling secure, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Um,
You're trying to find some behaviors to survive in that environment.
It almost kind of reminds me, when, because we've had people on that have talked about toxic environments with their parents,
Mhm.
whether it's fighting or divorce, or, maybe they had an alcoholic father and, an abusive mother, or just the two of them were at it. And it kind of reminds me now of that baby that I remember that we talked about on the show,
Mhm.
who's looking at the mother and can't get that security from the mother. It's kind of the same sort of situation where the child is still looking for that security
Yeah.
and that balance, a healthy, some sort of environment, and they're not getting it because it's toxic.
And these emotional
Wow.
circuits, they're not exactly the same for every person, and they do get affected by development. And just
Hmm.
like some people are better at math, some people are better at throwing a baseball or whatever. Your circuits vary for people. The circuits in a
Really?
sociopath are different from the average person,
So
much
some
like
people might get impacted from a trauma experience more so than other people.
yeah. So like loss, some people take loss more strongly than others.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huh.
or some people have a higher level of curiosity than others.
Yeah.
Some people like to play more than others.
That's true. Yeah, I've
you
seen
know,
those people. I'm trying to get them to go to work, and do their job. No,
I know.
yeah, we have
You
those
know,
around the office.
there's an interesting experiment with babies that came out of Eastern Europe where they were never touched and or held. The bottles
Yeah,
would
yeah, I
pop
heard
up,
of it.
would be changed, and
Hmm.
so they had what are called attachment disorder, and it's like those caring circuits shut down. In fact,
Hmm.
one of the ways that they measured that or got an indication is oxytocin is one of the hormones that's seems to be associated with that network.
Hmm.
And so you take a mother who has a birth child and they play this as a toddler who's watching a little video game,
Hmm.
and the oxytocin levels just go through the roof. With
Wow.
these babies, it would just stay flat.
Huh.
So it's kind of
This
an
sounds
indirect
like something
measure.
my
Yeah.
girlfriend's accused me of. Um, do you find that contributes to narcissism?
Well, a lot of this stuff we talk like we know what's going on, but we don't know.
Wait, you're the doctor who wrote the book.
Well, it's we use these computer analogies, all this other stuff, and
Oh,
there's so much we don't know about the brain.
that's
Even
true.
these circuits. We know that they're there. The details on it are very fuzzy right now.
Well, I can agree with you. There's so much we don't know about the brain. Sometimes I just sit and look at people and go,
Yeah,
"What the fuck happened? How come you're so stupid?"
yeah,
Um, so there you go. But no, this is really interesting. You give me a couple new paradigms to think about. I had just barely seen that baby video, I don't know, about a month or two ago or something.
uh-huh,
And it really, like, I was just like, holy crap, just watching the baby really start losing it. And it's just a baby,
yeah.
and you're like, wow, they really are more advanced than they should, than I guess I thought they were.
Well,
But
and they're working on that kind of that nonverbal,
mhm,
level. And again, their emotions are driving them to take care of needs. Threat,
mhm,
loss, connection, uh, social interaction, all that stuff is kind of going on, but there's not the mental process, the mental higher thinking processes to manage it.
yeah,
Because over time, your thinking part of your brain is supposed to be kind of the executor overseeing that
mhm,
emotional network. Although if they have a very strong association or trigger, it can overwhelm your thoughts.
wow.
Anybody
So
who anybody who's in love can tell you that, right?
yeah, that's true. I've seen that
Six
movie.
6 months later, you look and say, "Who is this person?"
Or in Lust, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that movie too. So now people that one thing that people have that have trauma, whether they recognize it or not, or know it or not, some of that subconscious we talked about, they tend to react to different things, overreact to different things, like
Right.
uh gaslighting, because if it's a trust trauma, if you gaslight them, if people lie to them, They tend to highly overreact,
Mhm.
and have trouble dealing with it. Sometimes they don't understand why. I guess that's another way that they can try and identify, why they're overreacting,
Well,
or
and again, there's a couple parts of that. Yeah, again, some of that time sometimes is the triggers we were talking about. There's
Mhm.
things in the other person that trigger associations.
Ah,
Uh, and people who come from a really dysfunctional background, they tend to go into relationships with the blinders on.
uh-huh.
It's interesting. You can take, let's say, a lady, and you can put her in a room with 15 guys. Within 15 minutes or so, she's talking to the guys from dysfunctional backgrounds, even though everybody is presenting well at that moment. And
Ah.
the reason is, again, this unconscious, subconscious communication. She gets around the people from
Ah.
positive, healthy backgrounds. They have appropriate limits, they appropriate emotion, that type. They feel funny. She gets
Mhm.
around the people that come from similar backgrounds. Oh, it feels familiar. And again, everybody's presenting well at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And
But they're
that's why.
still somehow picking up on the toxic subconscious
Well, it's not so much the
thing.
toxic, the healthy feels funny. It's kind of like when I was working with panic disorder, I would routinely give people a relaxation response
Mhm.
program to listen to. And a lot of times it would make them anxious at first because the
Oh, really?
feeling of anxiety or of relaxation was just so foreign to them.
Huh.
There's and I know when I've worked with people from dysfunctional backgrounds, and one of the things I try to get them to do is, okay, you need to find one or two healthy people and hang around them for a while, because all of their friends usually come from the same type of background, right? We
Oh,
surround ourselves with people that usually feel similar to the what we're familiar with, right?
yeah. And so
And
can you learn to disassociate? Let's say
oh,
you're the one challenge that I know, especially women have, is if they go to what they know. So they will, if they're used to abusive relationships, usually from a father relationship, they'll stick to those relationships. I've been guilty of the same thing. My mom said to me once, she's like, "Why do you always pick these awful women that are just messed up?" And I'm like, I don't know.
well, you're picking with the wrong emotional circuit.
There you go. There you go. And
It's that it's,
sometimes
it's that left circuit, right?
sometimes trauma, or
Yeah.
the lust circuit, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
But so you can disassociate that by just
Well,
kind of,
it's more you learn to desensitize to healthy,
huh?
and so I would have them identify one or two people that come from healthy backgrounds and just hang around them. And of course, the first complaint they would have is these people are so boring.
Yeah, they're boring
There's
because
absolutely
a
no
lot of
drama.
women are like, I want to go have fun.
There's no drama in their life,
There's
right?
no drama. You don't have the ups and downs, the roller coaster, right?
But what if they hang around them for 6 months or so? What they find is that comfort feels really good because they're not used to feeling safe and comfortable,
Yeah.
right? And so once you start to experience it, like with the relaxation response, wow, this feels pretty nice. I like this.
Now, isn't
And
there a dopamine trigger though to the drama, the high ups and downs?
well,
There's
yeah,
kind of a drug addiction to that.
well, yeah. I mean, we are certainly into excitement in our modern life.
Yeah. Because I know there's some people, they're so hooked on the excitement or for the attention and validation from men, they can't get off it, especially with social media now.
Yeah.
This Instagram mentality now, the OnlyFans mentality. You see a lot of the attention and validation desperation in the market.
See, and that gets back to what we're talking about with happiness, that
Mhm.
relationships, having those deep connection with another human being, that's really what gives you satisfaction long term.
Mhm.
And we don't understand that as a culture very well. That's not what our media, our movies and stuff don't show that. The Indiana Jones guy, that's kind of the ideal, right? But he always leaves him at the end, right?
It's true. Or James Bond.
Yeah, all those characters, right?
Spends my dating life. There's something, G1 Red Crypto came in, as
Mhm.
we were talking. This is kind of a fallback. Sometimes there are defense mechanisms they put in order to shield themselves from whatever gave them the trauma they begin with.
Yeah, and
So,
defense mechanisms sometimes have a bad name because they get overused. But defense mechanisms are there for the very purpose to defend ourselves from being overwhelmed.
oh,
So if I'm in an operating room, I need to be able to suppress my emotions and stuff so I can focus on what I'm doing.
yeah.
but I need to also be able to then tune in later on and process whatever's going on in my life, right? And that's the thing where defense mechanisms can sometimes be problematic. We live in such a comfortable area of the world, and you look around, most people still live in pretty harsh circumstances.
Yeah,
So
they
they
do.
need to have fairly rigid should must rules. They need to have fairly strong defense mechanisms just in order to survive. I mean, you
Yeah,
look at what's going on in the Middle East, you look at what's
yeah,
going on, in parts of Africa, you look at what's going on in, Kiev and stuff,
yeah.
you don't have time to sit around and have a lot of touchy feely feelings. You need to basically protect yourself, and so
Yeah.
that means you
Total
need
survival mode. We
yeah,
like to say.
you need to get pretty crusty. The problem again is when you get into an environment where you don't need that anymore, but you're still acting that way,
Do
and
you,
that's the problem.
do you think that's kind of the generational thing we've been going on from, you know,
Part
I
of
mean,
it is, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
my parents, my dad, he was World War II. He was in,
yeah,
he
tough as
was
nails.
oh yeah, well, he was
Yeah.
over in before the war. Then he was in Pearl Harbor and throughout the Pacific and stuff. And I remember when I was in my counseling program, and I was learning all this stuff. I was working on myself, getting more in touch with my feelings and stuff. And I sat down with him at a table and I said, Dad, I know we never talked this way. I just want to let you know, I really love you. And he looks at me, he says, what are you trying to say? I don't understand. you know, and so I go through it a second time and then it hits me. It's a level of communication he's just not capable of. Although he was just so generous. He did so much stuff for me, and he'd give you the shirt off his back. But that was just a level of communication that he didn't do.
Yeah. That explains the generational sort of thing.
Yeah,
Now we're almost too touchy feely where, oh God, the kid might fall down and scar his knee. Let's build
yeah.
let's arm him with the helicopter parenting thing going on.
Well, yeah, and
So,
I was reading an article on resilience the other day that was
mhm,
interesting because it was talking about how one of the big crises right now is our kids don't have much resilience,
they
and part of
don't.
that is because I used to go out riding my bike. I could ride for 20 miles and come back home and, do stuff and,
Yeah. In our
and
in our in our day, they actually had to have a commercial that would tell parents
are your kids,
at
you
10
know, your
o'clock, do
kids,
you know where your kids are? And the parents would be like sitting there, I don't know, drinking and smoking. And they'd be like, well, we
yeah,
have kids. Do we have kids? Oh,
yeah.
shoot. We need to go find them. Evidently, TV says so.
But kids don't have a lot of those opportunities a lot of times,
Yeah.
it's an
I mean, we were
interesting
we were
dilemma.
latchkey kids. I mean,
Yeah.
we know. I mean, we could survive sustenance off of garden hoses
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
God knows how
I
many
started paper
pathogens we
out in the
picked
fifth
up.
grade. I worked
Yeah.
paper routes for a long time.
If I wanted to eat, I just went through
Yeah.
people's garden because they had them back then, and sometimes we just stay out and
Yeah.
we test how long it would take for mom to come to the door and start screaming at us. You
Yeah.
know, we were like, hey, the street light's on. I wonder if they're going to see the commercial on
Well,
TV and remember us.
dinner was always a big magnet. So
Yeah, that was always the thing. Mom was like, you come for dinner. We're like, we've seen your cooking. So there you go. Now, one thing you talk about in your book that I think is really pertinent, we've touched on a little bit, how to reduce the negative effects of social media and devices. Social media has really become it started as a Pandora's box where everyone opened it, went, oh my God, well, we'll go one world and everyone's going to hug each other and it's going to be wonderful. And now it's like, and yeah,
yeah,
and
we're kind of like adolescents with it right now.
aren't we? Maybe,
We're trying to learn what's the what. I mean, because there's some really positive things about social media.
mhm,
My daughter, she did her master's over in England, and every Sunday we'd get on, Zoom with her, and we talk with her, and that's
mhm.
great time. And
Yeah,
I enjoy the internet, but at the same time, I don't spend a lot of time on social media other than business related stuff.
yeah. I mean, it's
Uh,
pretty toxic. They just had face or all the I think about 17 states here in America. They
yeah,
just sued Facebook and Instagram, and they say that it harms
yeah.
children and it's damaging. I've seen a lot of people that are grown people that are so addicted, like I said, to the dopamine rush of getting attention and validation.
Well, and it's
Um,
designed to do that. That's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's why even in teaching, when I was teaching, they said you gotta shift activities every 15 minutes, otherwise you lose their attention. It's
15 minutes. That even seems long.
Well, I mean, that was the
Yeah.
magic. You could do a 15-minute exercise or something. You
Okay.
had to move into something else, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Now it's the TikTok generation where it's 30
yeah.
seconds. Yeah.
Well, parents have to take control of it. I mean, they have some wonderful tools. They have tools where, the internet will shut down at certain times and only be
Mhm.
active, so kids
Oh.
can't get into it.
And then they
Uh,
lose their mind though. They're kind of
they learn how to do stuff. My niece, I remember when her kids were younger, she had a basket. She wanted them to have a phone so that in case they needed to contact her.
yeah.
But as soon as they came home, they had to put the phone in the basket. You
Oh,
know,
really?
and
I just give my kids pagers.
yeah, I remember those.
Remember those? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, the Gen Z is going, what? What do you say?
Yeah, well, what the heck is that? No, it's a matter, the saddest thing for me is to go out to a restaurant and see both parents on their phones and the kids on
And the
their
kids.
device,
Yeah.
and nobody's talking. It's a matter of realizing that you've got to take control of this stuff and, you've got to manage it in a wise way. I mean, even with our great granddaughter that I'm watching, we limit how much time she has on stuff.
Wow.
I mean, she likes to look at the what do you call it? The tablet,
Mhm.
and we give her, half hour before nap time, and so she's there looking
I
at her
mean,
little cartoony stuff.
maybe the thing is you've got to give them other stuff to do. Like my dad
Exactly.
would probably have been like, turn off the Twitter and go mow the lawn. And you're
Well,
like, go, you
well,
have
my
to
thing
go
with my
off.
kids was, they'd come and they say I'm bored. I say, boredom is good because people get wonderfully creative when they're bored. Now,
Ah.
if not, I have some chores for you to do.
There you go. We'll go find something to do, Dad. See, my parents,
Yeah,
our latchkey parents, would
yeah,
just throw us out in the environment and be like, "Survive, motherfucker. See you at dinner."
yeah,
And we stand at the door of the world, going, "What do we do with all this crap? Fuck it, we'll figure something out."
yeah.
And
Like I
that,
said, I had to paper out. I had animals to tend to and stuff.
yeah,
So yeah,
one
in
of
fact,
my,
it's interesting because like farm kids
mm-hmm,
have a much better self image than non-farm kids, and
really,
it's because they are required in order for the family to survive and to do
yeah,
well. So they have a positive role within the family, and this whole self-esteem thing is like it's more self-image, right? It's a little piece of your self-image, and the way you learn to have a positive self-image is by being competent,
hmm, and
and that's
doing
why,
things.
yeah, and that's why chores are so important. Yeah,
Wow,
the
yeah,
average,
chores.
yeah, the average kid has to make their bed and take the garbage out, and they don't do those two things,
Oh
right?
my god, the horror. Dude, I've seen some of these helicopter parents, they would
Yeah,
wipe the kid's ass at 19
yeah,
if
yeah.
they could. It's
No,
just extraordinary.
our kids, we had a lot of chores for them, and I remember even my daughter when she wanted a phone in her room, and so I said, okay, let's go take the little wiring off one of the phones, see how it's connected. Now you go in your room, you wire it up, and we did things like that.
Wow.
And she was
Boy,
wonderfully competent when she went out to
and
college. I
she
didn't.
report you to the CPS,
Well, nowadays, maybe I don't know.
yeah, nowadays they might do that. They're like, hey, you abused us. How do they abuse you?
Yeah.
They made us use a wired phone. Yeah,
No,
there you go.
it's like I said earlier, like, if you didn't want to participate in helping with dinner, fine, we'll see you for the next
Fine.
meal.
Yeah,
And
that's
my
what we're
son
doing.
only missed one meal.
That's all you need. You learn really quick. They're like, hey, these people are freaking serious. They're not going to put up with my crap.
And you can do that without being overly harsh.
Yeah, I do that with my dates.
Yeah.
So there you go. But I like this. More and more parents need to realize how dangerous and addictive it is. The addiction to the dopamine, the attention, the validation. I think it hurts women more. They say young women are suicidal. They're part of it is the FOMO. They see
Yeah.
there's
That fear of missing out. And especially, they're more sensitive, I think, to some of how mean kids can be,
oh yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
and women are vicious to each other
can
just
be.
on the face of it. I mean,
Yeah.
and then, the social media fakeness, you have these influencers run around that present themselves, they're making millions, billions, and then you find out they've been just running scams and they're going to jail.
But
Uh,
even your friends, everybody's living a better life than I am.
oh yeah. I mean,
Because
eh,
that's all you see on the internet, right?
yeah.
You, you
Plus
don't you don't see the bad stuff.
yeah, plus you don't see no one ever my friend, I remember there was a Foursquare back where everyone would check in for mayordom. And my
Yeah.
friend says, yeah, no one ever checks in on Foursquare at the methadone clinic, at the
Yeah.
AA clinic. No one
Yeah.
ever checks in at the rehab clinic. No one ever
Yeah.
checks in at the pawn shop or the
Yeah.
police station.
Yeah.
It's always when you're out to dinner at an expensive place or, you're someplace nice. You know, even with social media, they have like in LA, they have sets that you can go to that are cutaway sets of a private plane. That there's stages. You can go pay, I think it's like $129, and
Wow.
you can make it look like you can take these photographs like you're in a private plane, you're living the life. They have champagne there, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can do the whole photo. And it's a set. It's a little. You go to some office building, and
Yeah.
it's a cutaway set, and they're taking the pictures and people believe it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
people who built whole lives. I'm wearing all these diamonds here, this diamond watch, and
Yeah.
it's all fake. And it's interesting, and people believe it. And then they'll have these cars, and they'll have expensive cars, and then turns out they just been scamming people or running like crypto scams or something. It's just extraordinary.
People are starved for real relationship.
Is that what it is?
That's why a lot of these weekend programs and stuff are so successful. I remember back when S first came out, way, in the 70s and 80s. You give people an intense experience of intimacy, and man, you got them. You can drain all the money you want out of them.
Is that explains Tony Robbins then maybe and those firewalk things, and they have
Yeah,
I've
because
seen
because
people that are addicted
you
to motivation programs.
you give them that connection, that feeling of connection, and
Hmm.
intimacy and meaning, and man, you can get all kinds of money.
Wow. Well, that explains scammers. And people have less intimacy now more than ever in the market, so they
Well, of
probably makes
course.
them even more susceptible.
Well, yeah, and it used to be, you had your village or you had your block, you had your, your extended family, you had all kinds of people that you could go to and you could talk to about problems and stuff and connect with. And nowadays, people can go through their entire day without a single real connection with another person.
Yeah, and people are very isolated now.
Yep. And
They're
that
home.
isolation is what makes people weird, quite frankly. And that's
And
the
they
psychological
and
term.
you feel like you're not isolated. You're like, I got my wife and my kids.
Well, you're substituting excitement, you're substituting sex, you're substituting other things for what you really want, which is again that connection with another human being,
Wow. That
or your
explains a lot
or
of
your dogs,
explains a lot of relationships that
Yeah,
I've seen and marriages I've seen actually,
yeah,
and everything else. Connection is everything. And I guess if you're in a marriage, you're not looking at each other and you're not having that facial body language sort of interaction. You're ignoring each other. You're like, what do you want, honey? I don't know, whatever you want.
mhm.
You're probably going to have problems. So this explains a lot of things. Give us your final thoughts as we go out. We've discussed a lot of really cool things that you have in your book and your perspectives, change the paradigms and the way I think about some things. So I love it.
Yeah.
Give us your final thoughts and pitch on the book as we go out.
Well, the book is, like I said, takes you on a journey. If you want to know about what emotions are, why you have them, and how to manage ones that are causing problems in your life, it's got a lot of good stuff in there that can help you.
There you go. Give us your .coms too, Reneau, so people can find you on the interwebs.
So whyemotions.com, whyemotion.com, whyemotion.com. And you can find my connections to my YouTube channel, to the books. I've got some freebie stuff there. Uh, Everything you need to know about me is right there. Whyemotion.com.
There you go. Thank you very much, Reneau, for coming on. We really appreciate it, man. It's been a great show.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. I hope you guys learned some as well. If you didn't, go back and watch the damn show already again because repetition is good. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, youtube.com/Chris Foss, linkedin.com/Chris Foss, and Chris Foss one on the tickety talkie. Order up wherever fine books are sold. Came out May 2nd, 2023. Why You Feel the Way You Do. Understand and heal the source of stressful emotions. Maybe get enough copies here since it's coming up on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Mail them out to all your family you're going to be seeing here at your family reunion soon. And maybe you can get them to be less psychotic over Thanksgiving dinner as well. That might help everyone. There you go.
Great Christmas present.
Great Christmas present. Give it away to everyone you know. Maybe those people that are really high stress. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.
Mm.